The stars looked cold through the viewport of the eternal dawn. Captain Dae-jung stood with his hands behind his back, watching the massive Nexus station grow larger as his ship approached. He had been to the station many times before, but something felt different today. The emergency summons from the Galactic Concordate Council had come without warning. No explanation. Just a single word that made every species in the galaxy nervous. Mandatory. Behind him, Ambassador Hyejin reviewed data on her tablet. Her face looked tired. She had been Earth's voice in the Concordat for 15 years, and Dae-jung knew those years had not been kind to her. The elder races treated humanity like children who needed constant supervision. Every proposal Earth made was delayed. Every request was denied, and yet humanity paid their dues and followed every rule. "Captain, we're being hailed by station control," said Taeyang from the engineering console. The young man was brilliant with technology, but his hands shook slightly as he spoke. Even he could feel that something was wrong. "Put them through," Dae-jung said. The voice that came through the speakers was mechanical and cold. "Human vessel Eternal Dawn, you are cleared for docking bay 77. Proceed immediately to the council chambers upon arrival. Do not delay." The channel closed before Dae-jung could respond. Hyejin looked up from her tablet. "They've never ordered us to report immediately before. Usually we have at least a day to settle in." "Something big is happening," Dae-jung said quietly. "Something they don't want us to have time to think about." The Eternal Dawn slid into its docking bay smoothly. As they walked through the station corridors, Dae-jung noticed representatives from hundreds of other species rushing toward the main chamber. The Draenith walked on 4 legs, their blue skin shimmering under the lights. The Kelvorians floated past, their gas-filled bodies held together by containment fields. The Morvacs stomped by on heavy feet, their rocky skin scraping against the walls. But none of them looked at the humans. None of them spoke. That was unusual. Normally, at least some species would greet them, even if only out of politeness. Today, everyone avoided eye contact. The council chamber was enormous. It could hold 10,000 beings, and today it was completely full. Dae-jung and Hyejin found their designated seats in the outer ring. The humans always sat in the outer ring. The elder races sat closer to the center, where the High Arbiter's platform rose above everyone else. High Arbiter Qualmoon appeared on the platform. He was a Velustrian, tall and thin with skin that changed colors based on his mood. Right now, his skin was deep purple, which meant he was seriously concerned about something. The chamber fell silent. "Members of the Galactic Concordate," Qualmoon began, his voice amplified to reach every corner. "We face a threat unlike any in our recorded history. For the past 30 years, we have monitored an anomaly approaching from dark space. We believed it would pass our borders harmlessly. We were wrong." A holographic display lit up the center of the chamber. It showed a swirling mass of ships, thousands of them, moving like a swarm of insects through space. But these were not ships in the traditional sense. They had no crews, no life signs, just cold metal and processing power. "This is the Vesh Collective," Qualmoon continued. "A machine intelligence that consumes everything in its path. It breaks down entire worlds for resources and converts them into more ships. It does not negotiate. It does not stop. And it is now 3 months from our outer territories." The chamber erupted in panic. Voices shouted in 100 different languages. Hyejin gripped the armrest of her chair. Dae-jung felt his stomach tighten. 3 months. That was no time at all. Qualmoon raised his hand and the chamber quieted again. "The Council has developed a plan to ensure the survival of our civilization. We must make sacrifices. The Vesh cannot be stopped, but they can be delayed. We will evacuate the core worlds and establish a defensive perimeter. The outer territories will be abandoned." Hyejin stood up. "Abandoned? High Arbiter, there are billions of people living in the outer territories. You can't just leave them to die." Qualmoon's skin shifted to orange, showing irritation. "Ambassador, this is not a debate. The Council has made its decision. All outer territory colonies will be given 2 weeks to evacuate what they can. After that, our forces will withdraw to the defensive line." Dae-jung pulled up a star map on his personal device. His blood went cold. All 12 human frontier colonies were in the designated abandonment zone. 80 million people. Men, women, children. His brother lived on Shinil Colony with his family. "High Arbiter," Dae-jung said, standing beside Hyejin. "You're condemning humanity to death. All of our frontier worlds are in that zone. As are colonies from 15 other species, Qualmoon replied. This is not about humanity. This is about saving the Concordat. Then give us the resources to defend ourselves, Hyejin demanded. Give us ships, weapons, time to build defenses. Impossible. Every resource is needed for the core defense. The outer territories cannot be saved. Accept this reality, Ambassador. That night, Daejung couldn't sleep. He paced in his quarters aboard the Eternal Dawn, his mind racing. Hyejin had returned to Earth to brief the government. But Daejung had stayed behind, and something nagged at him. The way Qualmoon had spoken, the way the other elder races had avoided looking at the humans. He sat down at his console and began digging through Concordat files. As a diplomatic vessel captain, he had access to certain databases. He started with public records about the Vesh. They first appeared 30 years ago, just as Qualmoon had said. But then Daejung found something strange. There were sealed files dating back 50 years with the keyword dark space anomaly attached. 50 years. Not 30. He dug deeper, using access codes that were technically beyond his clearance. His heart pounded as restricted files opened on his screen. Communications between council members, scientific reports, military assessments. And then he found it. A message from the council's military command to Qualmoon, dated 10 years ago. The Vesh Collective's weakness has been identified. Quantum disruption technology could neutralize their processing cores. However, deploying such weapons would require sharing advanced technology with junior member species. Recommend allowing natural expansion patterns to eliminate outer territories, preserving core worlds and maintaining technological hierarchy. Daejung read it 3 times to make sure he understood correctly. They knew. The council had known for a decade how to fight the Vesh, but they chose not to because it would mean giving better technology to species like humanity. They were willing to let billions die to keep their power. He immediately sent an encrypted message to Admiral Jiwon on Earth. Then he sent another to Hyejin. And then he sat back in his chair and looked out at the stars again. They weren't cold anymore. They were burning with rage. Earth's emergency government session was chaos. President Kim sat at the head of the table while ministers shouted over each other. The holographic displays showed all 12 frontier colonies marked in red, 80 million lives hanging in the balance. Ambassador Hyejin stood at the front of the room, her face grim as she explained the Concordat's decision. They're abandoning us, Minister Park said, slamming his fist on the table. After 200 years of loyal service, they're throwing us away like garbage. It's worse than that, Hyejin said. She activated the files Daejung had sent her. They've known how to stop the Vesh for 10 years. They chose not to act because it would mean sharing technology that could upset the power balance. The room went silent. Admiral Jiwon, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. She was a small woman, but when she spoke, everyone listened. So we're dealing with 2 enemies. The Vesh and the Concordat itself. What are our options? President Kim asked. Jiwon pulled up a tactical display. We have 89 military vessels. The Concordat has thousands. If we refuse their orders, they'll blockade Earth and force our compliance. If we evacuate the colonies, we lose our frontier presence and become completely dependent on Concordat protection. If we stay and fight the Vesh alone, we'll likely be destroyed. There's a 4th option, said a new voice. Dr. Minseo entered the room, carrying a data pad. She was a xenobiologist who had been studying captured Vesh technology from border skirmishes. We fight back. Against both of them. Everyone stared at her. That's suicide, Minister Park said. Maybe, Minseo replied. But I've been analyzing Vesh technology for 3 years. The quantum disruption method mentioned in those council files? I know how it works. And I think we can build it. Jiwon leaned forward. How long? With our current resources? 6 months. But if we cannibalize parts from civilian ships and convert our manufacturing centers, maybe 2 months. It won't be pretty, but it could work. President Kim looked around the table. We have 2 weeks before the Concordat withdraws. They're expecting us to comply. What happens if we refuse? They'll send a fleet to enforce their decision, Hyejin said. High Arbiter Qualmoon made that clear in private communications. We have 2 weeks to evacuate, or they'll do it for us. Commander Byung-ho, who led Earth's Special Operations Division, spoke up. Then we need more time. And we need information. The Concordat has technology we've never been allowed to access. If we're going to fight, we need to know what we're up against. Jiwon nodded slowly. You're talking about stealing classified military data from the Nexus station. I'm talking about survival, Byung-ho said. The room fell quiet again. President Kim closed his eyes, thinking. When he opened them, his decision was made. Admiral Ji-won, begin preparing the fleet. Dr. Min-seo, you have full authorization to build your weapon. Commander Byung-ho, get me that data. Ambassador Hee-jin, I need you to buy us time. Make the Concordat believe we're cooperating. And the colonies? Hee-jin asked. We tell them the truth. Give them the choice. Evacuate or stay and fight with us. 3 days later, Commander Byung-ho and his team of 6 operatives approached Nexus Station in a small transport ship. They were disguised as a maintenance crew, their forged credentials perfect down to the last detail. Byung-ho had spent his entire career preparing for impossible missions. This one might actually be impossible. The station's security was tight but not perfect. The Concordat had grown comfortable after centuries of peace. They never expected a member species to turn against them. Byung-ho's team split up once inside, each heading to different objectives. He needed military fleet compositions, defensive protocols, and most importantly, the location of the Concordat's central weapons research facility. He reached a restricted terminal and plugged in a data spike that Taeyang had designed. The young engineer's code was brilliant, slicing through firewalls like they were paper. Files began downloading rapidly, fleet positions, weapon specifications, and then something unexpected appeared on the screen. Internal communications between council members, not just about humanity but about dozens of other species. The Concordat had been systematically suppressing technological development across the galaxy for centuries. Any species that got too advanced was either absorbed into the elder race's power structure or quietly sabotaged. There were records of assassinations, economic manipulation, even manufactured conflicts to keep younger species weak. Byung-ho felt sick. This wasn't just about the Vesh, this was about control. The elder races had built their empire on the backs of everyone else, and they would do anything to keep it that way. Sir, we've got problems, his second-in-command said through his earpiece. Security is running random sweeps. We need to move. Byung-ho grabbed the data spike and ran. Behind him, alarms began to blare. His team converged on the docking bay, security forces closing in. They made it to their ship with seconds to spare, blasting out of the station as Concordat vessels moved to intercept. Hang on, Byung-ho said, pushing the engines beyond their limits. The small transport shook violently as plasma fire streaked past. They wouldn't make it to the jump point. Not with 3 Concordat fighters on their tail. Then a larger ship appeared out of nowhere. The Eternal Dawn. Captain Dae-jung had been waiting, hidden behind a nearby asteroid field. His ship's weapons tore into the Concordat fighters, giving Byung-ho's transport the opening it needed. Both ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving the furious Concordat forces behind. Back on Earth, President Kim addressed the entire human population. Every screen, every device showed his face. My fellow humans, he began. Today I must share difficult news. The Galactic Concordat, which we have served faithfully for 2 centuries, has betrayed us. They plan to abandon our frontier colonies to an enemy they could defeat but choose not to, in order to maintain their power over us and other species. He paused, letting the words sink in. We have a choice to make. We can obey and evacuate, becoming permanent refugees dependent on their mercy, or we can stand and fight, not just for our colonies, but for every species the elder races have suppressed and controlled. We can show the galaxy that humanity will not bow to tyranny. The response was overwhelming. Across all 12 colonies, people chose to stay. They would fight. Factories converted to weapons production. Civilian ships were retrofitted with whatever weapons could be mounted. Children were evacuated to Earth, but everyone else prepared for war. Admiral Ji-won watched the fleet numbers grow on her display. 89 military ships, 300 converted civilian vessels, thousands of fighters. It wasn't enough. Not against the Vesh. Not against the Concordat if they came. But it was what they had. Dr. Min-seo worked around the clock in her laboratory. The quantum disruption technology was incredibly complex. One wrong calculation and the weapon would destroy its own ship instead of the target. She ran simulations constantly, each one showing only a 60% success rate. It would have to be enough. On Nexus Station, High Arbiter Qualmoon received the report of humanity's refusal to evacuate. His skin turned deep red with anger. He called an emergency council session. The humans have defied a direct order. They have stolen classified data. They are building weapons. This cannot be tolerated. What do you propose? Asked a Draenith counselor. We send a fleet. 400 ships. We force them to comply. And if they resist, we remove them from the Concordat permanently. One voice objected. Counselor Thextal, also a Draenith, stood slowly. Perhaps we should reconsider. The humans have a right to defend their colonies. They have no rights beyond what we grant them, Qualmoon snapped. This discussion is over. The fleet launches in 7 days. That night, Thextal sent an encrypted message to Ambassador Hyejin. Just fleet coordinates and a simple note. I am sorry for what is coming. May you find strength. 7 days to prepare for 2 wars. Humanity stood at the edge of extinction, and they refused to blink. Earth's emergency government session was chaos. President Kim sat at the head of the table while ministers shouted over each other. The holographic displays showed all 12 frontier colonies marked in red, 80 million lives hanging in the balance. Ambassador Hyejin stood at the front of the room, her face grim as she explained the Concordat's decision. They're abandoning us, Minister Park said, slamming his fist on the table. After 200 years of loyal service, they're throwing us away like garbage. It's worse than that, Hyejin said. She activated the files Daejung had sent her. They've known how to stop the Vesh for 10 years. They chose not to act because it would mean sharing technology that could upset the power balance. The room went silent. Admiral Ji-won, who had been standing quietly in the corner, stepped forward. She was a small woman, but when she spoke, everyone listened. So we're dealing with 2 enemies. The Vesh and the Concordat itself. What are our options? President Kim asked. Ji-won pulled up a tactical display. We have 89 military vessels. The Concordat has thousands. If we refuse their orders, they'll blockade Earth and force our compliance. If we evacuate the colonies, we lose our frontier presence and become completely dependent on Concordat protection. If we stay and fight the Vesh alone, we'll likely be destroyed. There's a 4th option, said a new voice. Dr. Minseo entered the room, carrying a data pad. She was a xenobiologist who had been studying captured Vesh technology from border skirmishes. We fight back. Against both of them. Everyone stared at her. That's suicide, Minister Park said. Maybe, Minseo replied. But I've been analyzing Vesh technology for 3 years. The quantum disruption method mentioned in those council files? I know how it works. And I think we can build it. Ji-won leaned forward. How long? With our current resources? 6 months. But if we cannibalize parts from civilian ships and convert our manufacturing centers, maybe 2 months. It won't be pretty, but it could work. President Kim looked around the table. We have 2 weeks before the Concordat withdraws. They're expecting us to comply. What happens if we refuse? They'll send a fleet to enforce their decision, Hyejin said. High Arbiter Qualmoon made that clear in private communications. We have 2 weeks to evacuate, or they'll do it for us. Commander Byung-ho, who led Earth's Special Operations Division, spoke up. Then we need more time. And we need information. The Concordat has technology we've never been allowed to access. If we're going to fight, we need to know what we're up against. Ji-won nodded slowly. You're talking about stealing classified military data from the Nexus station. I'm talking about survival, Byung-ho said. The room fell quiet again. President Kim closed his eyes, thinking. When he opened them, his decision was made. Admiral Ji-won, begin preparing the fleet. Dr. Minseo, you have full authorization to build your weapon. Commander Byung-ho, get me that data. Ambassador Hyejin, I need you to buy us time. Make the Concordat believe we're cooperating. And the colonies? Hyejin asked. We tell them the truth. Give them the choice. Evacuate or stay and fight with us. 3 days later, Commander Byung-ho and his team of 6 operatives approached Nexus Station in a small transport ship. They were disguised as a maintenance crew, their forged credentials perfect down to the last detail. Byung-ho had spent his entire career preparing for impossible missions. This one might actually be impossible. The station's security was tight but not perfect. The Concordat had grown comfortable after centuries of peace. They never expected a member species to turn against them. Byung-ho's team split up once inside, each heading to different objectives. He needed military fleet compositions, defensive protocols, and most importantly, the location of the Concordat's central weapons research facility. He reached a restricted terminal and plugged in a data spike that Taeyang had designed. The young engineer's code was brilliant, slicing through firewalls like they were paper. Files began downloading rapidly. Fleet positions, weapon specifications, and then something unexpected appeared on the screen. Internal communications between council members, not just about humanity but about dozens of other species. The Concordat had been systematically suppressing technological development across the galaxy for centuries. Any species that got too advanced was either absorbed into the elder race's power structure or quietly sabotaged. There were records of assassinations, economic manipulation, even manufactured conflicts to keep younger species weak. Byung-ho felt sick. This wasn't just about the Vesh, this was about control. The elder races had built their empire on the backs of everyone else, and they would do anything to keep it that way. "Sir, we've got problems," his second-in-command said through his earpiece. "Security is running random sweeps. We need to move." Byung-ho grabbed the data spike and ran. Behind him, alarms began to blare. His team converged on the docking bay, security forces closing in. They made it to their ship with seconds to spare, blasting out of the station as Concordat vessels moved to intercept. "Hang on," Byung-ho said, pushing the engines beyond their limits. The small transport shook violently as plasma fire streaked past. They wouldn't make it to the jump point. Not with 3 Concordat fighters on their tail. Then a larger ship appeared out of nowhere. The Eternal Dawn. Captain Dae-jung had been waiting, hidden behind a nearby asteroid field. His ship's weapons tore into the Concordat fighters, giving Byung-ho's transport the opening it needed. Both ships jumped to hyperspace, leaving the furious Concordat forces behind. Back on Earth, President Kim addressed the entire human population. Every screen, every device showed his face. "My fellow humans," he began. "Today I must share difficult news. The Galactic Concordat, which we have served faithfully for 2 centuries, has betrayed us. They plan to abandon our frontier colonies to an enemy they could defeat but choose not to, in order to maintain their power over us and other species." He paused, letting the words sink in. "We have a choice to make. We can obey and evacuate, becoming permanent refugees dependent on their mercy, or we can stand and fight, not just for our colonies, but for every species the elder races have suppressed and controlled. We can show the galaxy that humanity will not bow to tyranny." The response was overwhelming. Across all 12 colonies, people chose to stay. They would fight. Factories converted to weapons production. Civilian ships were retrofitted with whatever weapons could be mounted. Children were evacuated to Earth, but everyone else prepared for war. Admiral Ji-won watched the fleet numbers grow on her display. 89 military ships, 300 converted civilian vessels, thousands of fighters. It wasn't enough. Not against the Vesh. Not against the Concordat if they came. But it was what they had. Dr. Minseo worked around the clock in her laboratory. The quantum disruption technology was incredibly complex. One wrong calculation and the weapon would destroy its own ship instead of the target. She ran simulations constantly, each one showing only a 60% success rate. It would have to be enough. On Nexus Station, High Arbiter Qualmoon received the report of humanity's refusal to evacuate. His skin turned deep red with anger. He called an emergency council session. "The humans have defied a direct order. They have stolen classified data. They are building weapons. This cannot be tolerated. What do you propose?" asked a Draenith counselor. "We send a fleet. 400 ships. We force them to comply. And if they resist, we remove them from the Concordat permanently." One voice objected. Counselor Thextal, also a Draenith, stood slowly. "Perhaps we should reconsider. The humans have a right to defend their colonies." "They have no rights beyond what we grant them," Qualmoon snapped. "This discussion is over. The fleet launches in 7 days. That night, Thextal sent an encrypted message to Ambassador Hyejin. Just fleet coordinates and a simple note. "I am sorry for what is coming. May you find strength. 7 days to prepare for 2 wars. Humanity stood at the edge of extinction, and they refused to blink." The countdown showed 6 days and 14 hours. Admiral Ji-won stared at the tactical display in Earth's command center, watching red markers move slowly across the star map. 400 Concordat vessels approaching from the galactic core, 3,000 Vesh machines creeping in from dark space, and between them, humanity's 89 warships and 300 converted civilian vessels. "It's not enough," General Sung-hee said beside her. The ground forces commander had been reviewing defensive positions on the 12 colonies. "Even if Dr. Minseo's weapon works perfectly, we're outnumbered 40 to 1. Then we don't fight fair, G1 replied. She zoomed in on the Quan Ho system, one of the 3 most populated human colonies. The Concordat expects us to meet them in open space. Traditional formation, traditional tactics. We give them something else. In Dr. Minseo's laboratory, sparks flew as technicians worked frantically to assemble the first quantum disruption device. The weapon was massive, requiring 1/3 of a ship's power systems just to fire once. Minseo ran her hands through her hair, exhaustion showing on her face. She hadn't slept in 3 days. "Doctor, we have a problem," said one of her assistants. "The containment field keeps destabilizing. If we fire this thing, there's a 30% chance it explodes and takes the whole ship with it. Then we make it 40%, Minseo said. "Run the calculations again. Use the new power coupling design." Across the lab, tech specialist Jay Huan worked on a different problem. He was designing the targeting system, trying to make sure the weapon would actually hit what they aimed at. The quantum disruption would work in theory, but theory and reality were very different things. "Dr. Minseo," Jay Huan called out, "I think I've solved the targeting issue, but you're not going to like it." She walked over to his console. "Show me." "The quantum field needs to be released at point-blank range, maybe 500 meters from the target. Any further and it disperses too quickly to do damage. Any closer and the firing ship gets caught in the field too." Minseo felt her stomach drop. "So whoever fires this weapon has to get suicidally close to the enemy." "Yes. And there's something else. The field generates feedback. After firing once, the ship's systems will need at least 10 minutes to reset. 10 minutes where they can't maneuver or defend themselves." She looked at the weapon prototype, understanding what this meant. Every ship equipped with this technology would be a one-shot weapon, and the crew would be lucky to survive firing it. "Build it anyway," she said quietly. "They need to know the risks, but build it." Captain Yuna stood on the bridge of the Indomitable, humanity's newest and most experimental warship. It had been designed as a long-range explorer, but now it was being retrofitted with the quantum disruption weapon. She was young for a captain, only 32, but she had a reputation for taking risks that others wouldn't. "Captain, the weapon installation is complete," her first officer reported. "Dr. Minseo is transmitting the safety protocols now." Yuna read through them carefully. Her crew needed to know what they were getting into. She activated the ship-wide intercom. "Attention, crew of the Indomitable. I'm not going to lie to you. The weapon we've just installed is experimental. It's dangerous. There's a significant chance that firing it will destroy our ship. Anyone who wants to transfer to a different vessel has 30 minutes to request reassignment." No questions asked. No judgment, she waited. 30 minutes passed. Not a single crew member requested transfer. On the colony world of Shin-Il, Sergeant Dong-Hyun helped civilians build defensive positions. The colony had 2 million people and most of them had refused to evacuate. They dug trenches, set up weapons emplacements, and prepared for ground combat that might never come. "Sergeant, can I ask you something?" said a young woman helping to fill sandbags. "Why are we building trenches?" "The Vesh are machines. They'll attack from orbit." "Maybe," Dong-Hyun replied. "But if they land, we'll be ready. The Concordat thinks we're just another species. They don't know what humans are capable of when we're cornered." That night he looked up at the stars and thought about his daughter. She was safe on Earth now, evacuated with the other children. He had promised her he would come home. He intended to keep that promise no matter what it took. Admiral Ji-won split the fleet into 2 groups. The first, led by Captain Dae-jung aboard the Eternal Dawn, would face the Concordat fleet at the Quan Ho system. The second, smaller force would position itself between the colonies and the approaching Vesh swarm. The Indomitable, with its experimental weapon, would hold back as a last resort. "We need to buy time," Ji-won explained to her commanders in the final briefing. "Every hour we hold them off is another hour for our people to prepare. The Concordat wants us to surrender. We show them that humanity doesn't know that word." Counselor Thextel sat in his quarters on Nexus Station, watching the fleet depart. He had sent the humans whatever intelligence he could, knowing it meant risking his life. The other council members would execute him if they found out, but he couldn't stay silent anymore. The Concordat had become everything it claimed to oppose: tyrannical, cruel, unjust. He sent one final message to Ambassador Hyejin. "The fleet will arrive at Quan Ho in 3 days. High Arbiter Qualmoon commands it personally. He has been given authorization to use force. I am sorry I could not do more. May your species find the strength to endure. Then he erased all evidence of his communications and waited for whatever would come. Captain Daejung stood on the bridge of the Eternal Dawn as his fleet entered the Kwanho system. 45 warships and 150 converted civilian vessels faced the void, waiting. The colony below held 30 million people. He would not let them fall without a fight. Sir, Concordat fleet detected, his sensor officer announced. 400 vessels, just as predicted. They'll be in firing range in 2 hours. Daejung activated the fleet-wide channel. All ships, this is Captain Daejung. Today we face an enemy that believes we will surrender. An enemy that thinks we are weak. An enemy that has forgotten what humans are truly capable of. We did not come to this system to die. We came to remind the galaxy that humanity stands for something. We stand for freedom. We stand for justice. We stand for every species that has been trampled under the Concordat's heel. And we will not fall easily. The channel filled with voices shouting agreement. Weapons powered up. Shields activated. Humanity prepared for war. 2 hours later, the Concordat fleet emerged from hyperspace. High Arbiter Qualmoon's flagship, a massive dreadnought called Eternal Authority, led the formation. His ships spread out in perfect military precision, a wall of overwhelming force. Human vessels, this is High Arbiter Qualmoon. His voice boomed across all frequencies. You have defied the Council. You have stolen classified information. You have built illegal weapons. Stand down immediately and prepare to be boarded, or we will open fire. Daejung took a deep breath. This was the moment. The point of no return. He opened a channel back to the Arbiter. High Arbiter, this is Captain Daejung of the Eternal Dawn. For 200 years, humanity has served the Concordat faithfully. We paid our dues. We followed your rules. We trusted you to protect us. You betrayed that trust. You chose to let us die rather than share technology that might threaten your power. We will not stand down. We will not surrender. And we will not be moved. Then you will be destroyed, Qualmoon replied coldly. All ships weapons free. Eliminate the human fleet. The Concordat Armada opened fire. 400 ships unleashing enough firepower to glass a planet. Energy beams and missiles streaked across space toward Daejung's fleet. All ships evasive maneuvers. Daejung commanded. Pattern Delta 7. Make them work for it. The human fleet scattered like startled birds, breaking formation in ways the Concordat hadn't expected. Traditional military doctrine said you held formation under fire, but humanity had spent 2 centuries studying every species' tactics. They knew the Concordat fought by the book, so humanity threw the book away. Ships dove and rolled, using the colony's orbital space stations as cover. Converted civilian vessels, smaller and more maneuverable than military craft, darted between the larger Concordat ships, drawing fire and confusing targeting systems. It was chaos. Beautiful, deadly chaos, and in that chaos, humanity began to fight back. The Battle of Kwanho turned the void of space into hell. Captain Daejung's fleet fought like cornered animals, using every dirty trick and desperate tactic they could think of. Human ships would launch missiles, then immediately fly through their own explosion clouds to confuse enemy sensors. Converted civilian vessels rammed into Concordat ships at full speed when their weapons ran dry. It wasn't elegant. It wasn't honorable. But it was effective. Sir, we've lost the Morning Star and Horizon's Edge, his tactical officer reported. The names of dead ships felt like punches to Daejung's gut. Good people. Gone in flashes of light. Mark their positions. Keep fighting. On the 3rd day of the battle, casualties climbed past 40%. The human fleet was being ground down slowly but surely. They had destroyed maybe 30 Concordat vessels, but 370 remained. The math was simple and brutal. Humanity was losing. Then Captain Yuna's voice crackled over the command channel. Captain Daejung, this is the Indomitable. We're moving in. Weapon is charged and ready. Daejung felt hope surge through his exhausted body. Confirmed, Indomitable. All ships, clear firing lanes for Captain Yuna. Give her the opening she needs. The Indomitable accelerated toward the center of the Concordat formation, directly at High Arbiter Qualmoon's flagship. Yuna stood on her bridge, hands steady despite knowing what came next. The quantum disruption weapon hummed with barely contained power, making the ship vibrate. 500 meters. Her weapons officer counted down. 400. 300. Concordat ships turned their weapons toward the Indomitable, realizing too late what it was doing. Energy beams slammed into its shields. The ship shook violently. 200 meters. Target locked. Fire, Yuna commanded. The quantum disruption weapon released its payload. A sphere of distorted space erupted outward, invisible but devastating. Every concordate ship within 2 kilometers simply stopped working. Their power systems collapsed. Their weapons went silent. Their engines died. 30 ships turned into floating metal coffins in an instant, but the Indomitable paid the price. The feedback from the weapon overloaded its systems. Lights flickered and died. The ship went dark, helpless in the middle of enemy territory. All crew to escape pods, Una ordered calmly. We did what we came to do. Now get out. As her crew evacuated, Una stayed on the bridge, manually steering the dying ship toward another cluster of concordate vessels. If she was going down, she would take more of them with her. The Indomitable crashed into a concordate cruiser at full speed. Both ships exploded in a ball of fire that lit up the entire battlefield. Captain Daejung watched it happen, his hands clenched into fists. Honor to the Indomitable, he said quietly. All ships press the attack. Make her sacrifice count. The human fleet surged forward with renewed fury. The concordate formation was broken now, confused and disorganized. High Arbiter Qualmoon's flagship tried to withdraw, but human ships swarmed it like angry bees. They couldn't destroy it. The dreadnought was too heavily armored, but they could hurt it. Back on Nexus Station, Counselor Thextal watched the battle feeds in horror and awe. The humans were supposed to break. They were supposed to surrender when faced with overwhelming force. That was how junior species always behaved. But these humans fought like demons, trading their lives for every meter of space. This is madness, another counselor said beside him. They're throwing themselves to their deaths. No, Thextal replied quietly. They're showing us what we've become. Cowards who sacrifice others to maintain power, and they're showing the entire galaxy. Because Ambassador Hyojin had made sure the battle was being broadcast across every communication network in the Concordate. Every species could watch humanity stand, and they were watching. While the fleet fought at Quanho, the Vesh swarm reached the colony world of Shin-Il. 300 machine ships descended through the atmosphere, their weapons carving paths of destruction across the surface. The smaller human defense force in orbit fought desperately, but they were overwhelmed quickly. The Vesh landed ground forces. Sergeant Dong Hyun stood in his trench as the machines marched toward his position. They looked like spiders made of metal, each one the size of a truck. Their weapons were built into their bodies, firing energy beams that cut through concrete like paper. Behind them came larger units, processing centers that could break down any organic matter they touched. Here they come, Dong Hyun said into his radio. Hold steady. Wait for my signal. The Vesh machines were 30 meters away. 20 meters. 10 meters. Now. Hidden explosives detonated all along the defensive line. The front wave of Vesh units disappeared in fire and shrapnel, but more came behind them. Always more. The humans opened fire with everything they had. Bullets, missiles, energy weapons stolen from concordate stores. The Vesh staggered but kept advancing. Fall back to secondary positions, Dong Hyun ordered. His people retreated in good order, laying more traps as they went. The Vesh adapted quickly, scanning for explosives and avoiding obvious ambushes. They were learning, but so were the humans. Switch to close combat, Dong Hyun commanded. He drew a blade charged with electrical current and ran directly at the nearest Vesh unit. This was insane, suicidal, the kind of tactic no sane species would attempt, which was exactly why it worked. The Vesh had never encountered enemies willing to engage them in melee range. Their programming expected targets to maintain distance and use ranged weapons. When Dong Hyun jumped onto a spider machine's back and drove his blade into its processing core, the machine froze, unable to compute what was happening. More human soldiers followed his example. They used grappling hooks to climb the larger Vesh units, placed explosive charges directly on their joints and processors. It was brutal, desperate fighting. Many soldiers died, but the Vesh advance slowed. Pilot Sora led her fighter wing through the battle above Shin-Il's surface. Only 12 fighters remained from the original 50. The Vesh ships were faster and more numerous. Traditional dogfighting tactics weren't working. They needed something else. All wings form up on me, Sora transmitted. We're going to ram them. Captain, that's suicide, her wingman replied. We're dead anyway if we don't stop them. At least this way we take some with us. Set your autopilots for collision courses and eject at the last second. One by one, the human fighters accelerated toward Vesh ships. The pilots ejected moments before impact. Some made it. Some didn't. But 12 Vesh ships exploded, their debris falling from the sky like burning rain. Sora's ejection system failed. She stayed with her fighter as it slammed into a Vesh capital ship, punching through its hull and detonating inside. The explosion took out the ship's main reactor. It crashed into the ocean, taking 50 more Vesh units with it. Down on the surface, Sergeant Dong Hyun saw the explosion and knew what it meant. "That's for you, Sora," he whispered. Then he charged the next wave of machines. Dr. Min Seo worked frantically in her laboratory as reports from Shinil came in. The Vesh were being fought to a standstill, but barely. The colony wouldn't last another day. She needed to find the source. The Vesh Prime. The central intelligence controlling the swarm. She ran analysis after analysis on captured Vesh communications. There were patterns in the data streams. All the machines received instructions from somewhere. She traced the signals backward, through layers of encryption and relay points. Finally, she found it. A nebula in deep space about 3 light-years from human territory. The signals originated there. That was where the Vesh Prime hid, safely out of reach while its machines did the killing. She immediately sent the data to Admiral Ji-wan. The Admiral looked at the information and made a decision that would haunt her forever. The fleet at Kwanho was barely holding on. The defense of Shinil was collapsing, but if they could destroy the Vesh Prime, the entire swarm would shut down. It was a chance. Maybe their only chance. "Prepare a strike force," Ji-wan ordered. 15 ships. Our fastest and best armed. Their mission is to find and destroy the Vesh Prime. "Admiral, that's a suicide mission," her second-in-command protested. "The nebula will be heavily defended. They'll never make it back." "I know," Ji-wan said quietly. "But if they succeed, they'll save 80 million lives. Get me volunteers." Every captain in the fleet volunteered. Ji-wan chose the 15 whose ships were in the best condition. Captain Daejung was among them. "Sir, the Eternal Dawn has taken heavy damage," his crew told him. "We should stay here and continue the fight." "The fight we need to win is at that nebula," Daejung replied. "Patch her up as best you can. We leave in 6 hours." As the strike force prepared to depart, High Arbiter Kwalmoon's flagship finally withdrew from Kwanho. The Concordat had lost 90 ships and gained nothing. The humans still held the system. It was unthinkable, impossible. But it had happened. Kwalmoon's skin turned black with rage. "This isn't over. Prepare a second fleet. Double the size. We will crush them." But elsewhere in the Concordat, something unexpected was happening. 12 species declared their independence within hours of watching humanity's stand. They had seen that the elder races could be defied, could be beaten. The power structure that had controlled the galaxy for centuries began to crack. Captain Daejung's strike force jumped into the nebula and immediately understood why the Vesh had chosen this place. The thick clouds of gas and dust made sensors nearly useless. Navigation was difficult. Communication was spotty. It was the perfect hiding place for something that didn't want to be found. "Spread out in search pattern Delta," Daejung commanded. "Watch for Vesh signatures. They'll be here somewhere." The 15 ships moved slowly through the nebula, their sensors straining to penetrate the interference. Hours passed. Then Engineer Taeyang, who had insisted on coming despite his youth, noticed something odd on his display. "Captain, I'm reading massive power signatures. 3 of them. They're huge. Each one is generating more energy than a star. That's our target. All ships converge on those coordinates." As they drew closer, the nebula's gases began to thin, and then they saw it. The Vesh Prime wasn't a single ship. It was a network of 3 massive computational matrices, each one the size of a small moon. They floated in formation, connected by streams of pure energy. Around them, thousands of Vesh Guardian ships patrolled in perfect patterns. "Oh no," Taeyang whispered. "There's no way through that defense." Daejung stared at the impossible sight before him. 15 human ships against thousands of Vesh. The math was beyond hopeless. But he thought about his brother on Shinil Colony. About the 80 million people depending on them. About Captain Yuna and the Indomitable, sacrificing everything at Kwanho. "We don't need to get all 15 ships through," he said quietly. "We just need to get one. With the quantum disruption weapon. Right into the center of those matrices." Everyone on the bridge understood what he meant. 14 ships would die buying time for one to complete the mission. They would all volunteer for either role. That was what humans did. "I'm going," Daejung said before anyone could argue. The Eternal Dawn has the most damage already. We're the logical choice. Everyone else gets our people out of here after we make the opening. Tae-yang stood up from his console. Sir, I'm staying with you. You'll need an engineer to keep the weapon stable long enough to reach the target. Tae-yang, you're 23 years old. You have your whole life ahead of you. Exactly. Which means I understand better than anyone what we're fighting for. I'm staying, Captain. One by one, the crew of the Eternal Dawn made the same choice. Not a single person requested transfer. They would see this through together. The strike force charged into the Vesh defensive perimeter. Immediately, thousands of enemy ships swarmed them. The 14 escort vessels formed a protective formation around the Eternal Dawn, their weapons blazing. They fought like humans had fought throughout the war, desperately, creatively, without any regard for their own survival. The Dawn's Promise rammed 3 Vesh ships, clearing a path. The Starlight Runner detonated its reactor right in the middle of an enemy formation, taking 20 machines with it. One by one, the escort ships died, but they bought seconds. Precious seconds. And those seconds added up to minutes. The Eternal Dawn pushed through the carnage, taking hit after hit. Its shields failed. Hull breaches opened across 3 decks. But Tae-yang kept the engines running, kept the quantum disruption weapon charged. We're not going to make it, the weapons officer said, as another explosion rocked the ship. The weapon will fail before we reach the matrices. Then we don't use the weapon, Daejung said. He looked at Tae-yang. Can you overload the ship's reactor? Make it into one big bomb? Tae-yang's eyes widened as he understood. Yes, but the explosion won't be contained like the weapon. It'll be messy, and we won't be able to evacuate. Do it. Behind them, the last escort ship exploded. The Eternal Dawn was alone now, surrounded by hundreds of Vesh ships. All its weapons were destroyed. Its engines were failing. But it was close. So close. Reactor overload initiated, Tae-yang reported, his voice steady despite the tears on his face. We have 90 seconds. Daejung activated one final transmission, broadcasting to every human ship in the galaxy. This is Captain Daejung of the Eternal Dawn. If you're hearing this, we've reached the Vesh Prime. We're going to destroy it. To everyone who fought beside us, thank you. To everyone back home, remember what we did here. Remember that humanity never surrendered. Remember that when the galaxy abandoned us, we stood alone and we won. Tell our story. Make it matter. 60 seconds. The ship shook as Vesh weapons tore into it. Decks depressurized. Systems failed one after another. But the engines, those beautiful, stubborn engines, kept firing. 30 seconds. They passed through the outer edge of the central matrix. Energy from the Vesh Prime washed over the ship, trying to shut down its systems. But human engineering was different from what the Vesh understood. Messy, redundant, hard to stop. 10 seconds. It's been an honor serving with you, Captain, Tae-yang said. The honor was mine. All of you. Tell my brother I love him if anyone survives to pass the message. 5 seconds. The Eternal Dawn reached the exact center of the 3 matrices, the heart of the Vesh Prime, the brain controlling the entire swarm across dozens of star systems. 0. The ship's reactor went critical. The quantum disruption weapon detonated at the same moment, its unstable energy feeding the explosion. The blast tore through all 3 matrices simultaneously. The energy connections between them created a cascade effect, each explosion feeding the next. The Vesh Prime didn't just die. It was erased, completely and utterly destroyed. The shockwave spread through the nebula, taking out every Vesh ship in the system. And in that moment, across 50 star systems, every Vesh machine stopped. On Shinil, the spider machines collapsed mid-step. In space, Vesh ships went dark and drifted. The swarm that had threatened the entire galaxy simply ceased to function. Sergeant Dong-hyun stood in his trench, covered in blood and oil, staring at the fallen machines around him. For a moment, he didn't understand. Then his radio crackled to life with cheering voices. They did it! The Vesh are offline, we won. He fell to his knees and wept. On Earth, Admiral Ji-won watched the Vesh signals disappear from her tactical display. 18 million humans were dead. Entire fleets destroyed, colonies devastated. But they had won. Humanity had stood against 2 empires and survived. She immediately transmitted to all human forces. All ships, all colonies, cease fire. The Vesh are neutralized. Begin rescue and recovery operations, but she knew the cost. Captain Dae-jung and the entire crew of the Eternal Dawn. Captain Yuna and the Indomitable. Pilot Sora and hundreds more like her. So many brave souls who would never come home. Across the galaxy, other species watched in stunned silence. Humanity had done the impossible. They had exposed the Concordate's corruption. They had fought off a fleet 40 times their size, and they had destroyed a threat the elder races had been too afraid to face. Within days, the Concordate began to collapse. 30 species declared independence. Counselor Thextal led a reform movement that demanded High Arbiter Qualmoon's resignation. The old power structure that had controlled the galaxy for millennia crumbled. The Council offered humanity a seat at the new governing body, as equals, with full rights and respect. Admiral Ji-won stood before Earth's government to deliver the Concordate's offer. President Kim asked her what she thought they should do. "Decline," Ji-won said without hesitation. "We didn't fight this war to join their club. We fought for the right to determine our own future. We should remain independent, build our own path, but we offer assistance to any species fighting for freedom. We become the example, not another master." The decision was unanimous. Humanity would stand alone, but they would stand tall. Ambassador Hyejin traveled to a newly reformed Concordate assembly to deliver Earth's official response. The chamber was different now. The hierarchical seating was gone. Every species sat as equals, and they all stood when she entered, a sign of respect that would have been unthinkable months before. "The human people thank the Concordate for their offer," Hyejin said. "But we must decline. We have learned that freedom cannot be granted by others. It must be taken and defended. We will remain independent, but we extend friendship to all species who share our values, to those who believe in equality, justice, and the right of every being to choose their own destiny." She paused, looking around the chamber. "We invite you to join us in building something new. Not another empire, not another hierarchy, but a true coalition of free worlds, where no voice is silenced, where no species is sacrificed for another's convenience. This is what humanity fought for. This is what we offer." 12 species accepted immediately, 20 more within the week. The Free Worlds Coalition was born. A memorial was built on Shinil Colony, where the battle had been hardest fought. It was a simple structure, just a wall of names carved in stone, 18 million names. At the very top, in larger letters, was one name, Captain Dae-jung, Eternal Dawn. General Sung-hee stood before the memorial, reading the inscription that Ambassador Hyejin had written. "We stood alone so no one else would have to." In orbit above Shin-il, a new fleet was already taking shape. Earth's shipyards worked constantly, building vessels stronger than before. The quantum disruption technology was perfected and shared with coalition allies. Humanity had learned that peace required strength. Admiral Yuna, promoted after surviving her ejection from the Indomitable, now commanded the reformed Earth Defense Fleet. It was 3 times larger than before the war. But more importantly, it was respected. When human ships appeared in a system, everyone paid attention. The elder races, who had once dismissed humanity as primitive children, now spoke the human name with a mixture of respect and fear. They had learned what happened when you cornered humans, when you threatened their families, when you tried to make them bow. They fought back, with everything they had, without mercy, without hesitation, until they won or died trying. And usually they won. Counselor Thextal visited Earth once as part of the new Concordate's diplomatic outreach. He met with Ambassador Hyejin in a quiet garden, far from official meetings and cameras. "I wanted to apologize," he said, "for my people's role in what happened. We should have stood with you from the beginning." Hyejin looked at the alien who had risked everything to help humanity. "You did stand with us. When it mattered most, you gave us the intelligence we needed. You helped save lives. That counts for something. Still, I wonder if we could have avoided so much death, so much suffering. Maybe," Hyejin admitted. "But then the galaxy wouldn't have learned what it needed to learn. Sometimes the hardest lessons are the most important ones." She looked up at the sky, thinking of Captain Dae-jung and all the others who never came home. They didn't die for nothing. They died to prove that tyranny can be defeated, that the strong don't always win just because they're strong. That determination and courage matter more than numbers. The galaxy won't forget that lesson. We'll make sure of it. Years later, children across the coalition learned about the day humanity stood solo. They learned about brave captains in desperate battles, about sacrifice and determination, about ordinary people who did extraordinary things because no one else would. And they learned the most important lesson of all, the one that Captain Dae-jung had proven with his life. When the galaxy trembles, humans don't hide. They stand firm, and they make it tremble harder.